Have you ever heard a story that was so surprising it stuck with you for days, or even years? A story that really makes you think about how someone could be so mean, and how evil can be right under our noses. Mackenzie Lueck was a smart and kind 23-year-old college student with a lot going for her. She went missing in June 2019. At first, everyone thought she might have just gone away for a bit, or was hanging out with someone without letting them know. But as time passed, a really awful truth started to come out. Mackenzie was killed by someone she believed she could rely on. His name is Ayoola Ajayi. Before anyone really understood what was going on, Ajayi looked like just another person in Salt Lake City. But if you looked closer, you'd find he had a risky side that not many people knew about. First, we're going to dive into who Mackenzie was, who Ajayi was, and how their paths crossed in such a heartbreaking way. We're going to check out the warning signs from Ajayi's past, Mackenzie's last moments, the investigation into her going missing, the finding of her body, and the trial that came after all that. Alright, let's kick off this journey. It's going to be a bit sad, but there are some important truths we need to talk about. We really need to share Mackenzie's story clearly for her family, friends, and everyone who cared about her. Just a heads up that sometimes bad stuff can show up in places we totally don't see coming. Before we get into the details of the crime, it's important to understand who Mackenzie Lueck was as a person. Mackenzie was born on March 8, 1996, and she grew up in El Segundo, California. She had 3 brothers, 1 older and 2 younger. She grew up in a really supportive family that believed in her dreams and appreciated her kind heart. Mackenzie was on the swimming team and played water polo in high school. She really liked being in the water and had fun staying active. Her classmates thought of her as super friendly, always cheerful, and really determined. After finishing high school, she chose to attend the University of Utah, where she studied kinesiology and pre-nursing. She even had a part-time job at a biological testing company in Salt Lake City, trying to get some experience for her future career. Mackenzie always wanted to help people by working in medicine or nursing. She was getting ready to graduate in May 2020, which shows how close she was to hitting another big milestone in her life. Friends said she was always there for people, ready to listen or share a smile. She was also in the Alpha Chi Omega sorority, where she made a lot of friends and got involved in charity work. Mackenzie's faith was a really important part of her life. She grew up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which a lot of people just call the Mormon Church. Even though people have different opinions about how strong her faith was, she definitely respected the values she grew up with, like helping others, being kind, and supporting her community. Mackenzie was really a caring, hard-working, and fun-loving person at heart. She always made time for her family, friends, and her own future goals. No one, not even Mackenzie, could have seen the trouble that was waiting just ahead. That night, June 17, 2019, everything flipped upside down. Mackenzie went to California for her grandma's funeral and then took a late-night flight back to Salt Lake City. She got to the Salt Lake City International Airport at about 1:35 a.m. or something like that. She then grabbed a lift to this spot called Hatch Park, which is located just north of Salt Lake City. The Lyft driver later told the police that Mackenzie picked Hatch Park as the place to get dropped off. The driver mentioned that Mackenzie looked pretty chill, even texting on her phone. Mackenzie got out of the car as soon as they reached the park. The driver said she was looking around for the person she was supposed to meet. She told the driver she was meeting a friend, so there wasn't really any reason to be concerned. But this was definitely not normal. Mackenzie got dropped off at around 3 a.m., which is pretty weird for meeting someone at a public park, especially when it's dark out. Mackenzie was 23, so she was an adult and could make her own choices. It looked like she had her own personal reasons or plans going on. Mackenzie was last spotted walking over to a car in the parking lot after the driver took off. The car was owned by Ayoola Ajayi, a guy she had talked to before. No one around her had a clue about the danger she was facing, but this would be the last time anyone would see her alive. By June 20th, Mackenzie's dad, Greg Lewick, started to get really worried. He hadn't heard from his daughter since she got back from California. He told the Salt Lake City Police Department that she was missing. When everyone heard she was missing, a lot of people thought she might just show up again, maybe having gone on a quick trip or hanging out with a friend. But as the days went by, things just kept getting worse. The investigation into Mackenzie's disappearance really kicked off at this point. Friends, family, and the police started looking all over the place, putting up flyers and sharing stuff on social media. They had no idea that the person who gave her a ride from the park was hiding something really dark and creepy. Now that we know how Mackenzie disappeared, let's figure out who Ayoola Ajayi was. From the outside, Ajayi looked like any other person trying to make a life for themselves in the United States. He came from Nigeria and had a green card that let him live and work here. He went to Utah State University for a while to study computer science, but he didn't end up graduating. Ajayi worked a bunch of jobs, mainly in the tech field. He also spent a little time in the Army National Guard, but it didn't last very long. At first look, people might think he's just another person in Salt Lake City trying to get by. But there were warning signs in Ajayi's life that hinted at something darker going on underneath. About a year before Mackenzie went missing, Ajayi had asked a woman to come over to his place. Things got really messed up when he tried to sexually assault her. He held her down and even bit her a few times when she tried to fight back. Back in early 2019, Ajayi got a contractor to create a hidden soundproof room beneath his porch. He wanted to put hooks on the walls and also a fingerprint scanner for getting in. He said it was to hide alcohol from his Mormon girlfriend, but the contractor was really uncomfortable with it. He turned down the job because it seemed risky and kind of weird. Ajayi's house was packed with security cameras, particularly in his master bedroom. This kind of watching made people wonder what he was really up to. Why are there so many cameras? Was he secretly recording people? Ajayi wrote a book called Forge Identity, and it has some pretty unsettling themes. The characters in his story faced death and were burned, and the plot had a lot of dark and violent themes. Some people started to think about whether the book showed Ajayi's dreams way before he actually did them in real life. Ajayi's ex-wife mentioned that he would get aggressive when things didn't go his way. She even said he threatened to have someone kidnap and kill her. She stopped talking to him because she was scared for her safety. All these signs showed that someone might have violent tendencies, a need for control, and a readiness to hurt others. Unfortunately, Mackenzie didn't realize just how dangerous Ajayi really was. She thought she was meeting a friend or someone she knew late at night, not a dangerous person with a shady history. Mackenzie and Ajayi met on a dating site called Seeking Arrangement. This site is popular for linking up sugar babies with sugar daddies. Many people use it to find financial help in return for companionship or dating. We don't really know how long they talked or the specifics of what they agreed on, but we do know they've been in touch since 2018. Mackenzie was an adult, so she could make her own decisions. She might have been looking for some financial help for her studies, or maybe she was just curious about meeting new people. We might never find out all the reasons she had. So, Ajayi saw this connection as a chance to trick her into a trap. Mackenzie texted Ajayi when she flew back from California on June 17th. They decided to meet up that night at Hatch Park. Mackenzie told her Lyft driver she was meeting a friend, so it seems like she didn't think anything was wrong. Just keep in mind that chatting with people online or through apps can be risky if we don't really know who they are. Mackenzie probably thought Ajayi was chill enough to hang out with so late at night. She didn't have any reason to believe he meant to be violent. But as we've noticed, Ajayi had a pretty troubling past that he kept secret from most people. In a lot of tragic situations like this, the person who gets hurt ends up trusting someone they shouldn't or misses the signs that something is off. Mackenzie's sad story really opened a lot of people's eyes about using dating apps and websites. After hearing about what went down, a lot of people started to wonder if it's really safe to meet up with strangers without checking them out first or telling friends what's going on. This part of Mackenzie's story shows how meeting people online can sometimes go really wrong if the other person is not safe. It's not about pointing fingers at Mackenzie, it's more about getting the context of the situation when she met Ajayi. She had no idea how this meeting would change everything for her. Mackenzie hopped into Ajayi's car at about 3 a.m. at Hatch Park. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. A few days later, her family started to worry when they couldn't reach her at all. She just stopped replying to my texts and calls, which was really unusual for her. Her dad called the cops, and before long, news sites and social media were all over the story about a missing student from the University of Utah. So, people started asking, why would she just vanish right after coming back from a family funeral? Did she leave by herself, or did someone take her away? Who was she hanging out with that night? The police began looking at phone records, chatting with the Lyft driver, and searching for any hints that could help them figure out where Mackenzie had gone. They found out that Mackenzie and Ajayi had been texting each other early that morning, and not long after she met him, Mackenzie's phone stopped connecting to nearby cell towers. Mackenzie was seen by her friends as someone who was really social and independent, but she also made an effort to stay in touch with everyone. Everyone got really worried when it suddenly went quiet. Her family kept hoping that she was just taking a break, but as the hours turned into days, that hope started to fade away. The people in Salt Lake City came together to help the Lewick family. They made flyers, shared her picture online, and urged anyone who knew something to speak up. At the same time, Ayoola Ajayi pretended like he had no idea what was going on. He just went on with his life like nothing was wrong. But secretly, he was trying to cover up all the proof of what he had done. When the police asked him about it, he said he didn't know where Mackenzie was and that she had just left on her own. But detectives quickly started to think that his story didn't really make sense. As the detectives looked into things more, they found even more suspicious evidence. They discovered that Ajayi had switched off his home security cameras around the time Mackenzie came over. They found out that he had told his neighbors not to worry if they noticed any weird smells coming from his backyard because he was planning to have bonfires for some reason. The police got a search warrant for Ajayi's place in the Fair Park neighborhood of Salt Lake City. They searched his house, yard, and all the electronic devices they could find. Neighbors said they saw Ajayi with a big fire behind his garage on June 17th and June 18th, only a few hours after Mackenzie went missing. The smell from that fire was really bad and totally different from the usual scent of wood or trash. While looking around, the investigators found some personal stuff that belonged to Mackenzie. They also discovered some burned tissue and a few of her belongings that were charred, which later turned out to be hers. This was a big moment that changed everything. It really looked like Mackenzie didn't leave on her own and that she had been murdered. The investigation also found out that Ajayi was trying to make a hidden area under his porch. It was meant to be soundproof, with hooks on the walls and a fingerprint lock. The contractor he talked to felt really uncomfortable and turned down the job. This finding suggested a scheme that was pretty creepy and unsettling, maybe connected to kidnapping or torture. As the police worked on their case, the community started to get really worried. Mackenzie's friends and family were really hoping she was still alive, but the signs were pointing to a pretty grim situation. The police held a press conference and said they had some reasons to think that something bad might have happened to Mackenzie. Ajayi kept insisting that he was innocent. He said he had no idea where Mackenzie went after they met, but the physical evidence told a different story. The police thought they were up against a guy who had really thought through a murder and tried to cover it up by burning everything related to it. As the investigation went on, reporters and interested people began looking into Ajayi's background. What they discovered was really unsettling. A woman said that Ajayi had asked her to come over and then attacked her. He attempted to assault her, held her down, and bit her. She got away, but she ended up with some bruises and bite marks. Even though she told them about it, it looks like the case never went anywhere in court. Ajayi's ex-wife claimed that he had threatened her life, saying he could have someone kidnap or kill her if she didn't do what he wanted. Ajayi wrote and published a book that shows scenes of people getting killed and burned. The main character got mixed up in some illegal stuff. Some parts really seemed to focus a lot on violence. Lots of people were curious if this book gave a glimpse into Ajayi's risky way of thinking. So, Ajayi was looking to create a soundproof room that has hooks and a fingerprint lock. This really sent shivers down people's spines, thinking about what he could do to someone stuck inside. Cleaners and visitors pointed out that Ajayi had a lot of cameras set up all over his house, particularly in the bedroom. People started to think that he might have been recording private stuff or getting ready for something really shady. Records indicated that Ajayi had considered traveling abroad or getting a one-way ticket to Cuba. It seemed like he was planning to take off if the police got too close. All these clues created an image of a person who was really struggling, showing signs of being violent, controlling, and secretive. People who only knew Ajayi a little were really surprised. They never thought he could be so cruel. But people who noticed the warning signs figured that something like this could have been on the way for a while. On June 28, 2019, the police thought they had enough proof to arrest Ajayi. He was charged with kidnapping and aggravated murder. They also added charges for messing with a body after they found out he had burned Mackenzie's remains. Everyone quickly heard about Ajayi getting arrested. People felt a mix of relief that a suspect was finally caught, but they were also really shocked by the details that came out. This situation turned from a missing person case into a murder investigation that revealed a shocking act of violence. Neighbors remembered how Ajayi behaved before he got arrested. Some people thought he seemed pretty chill, while others felt like he looked a little anxious. Either way, he acted like he wasn't really part of it and that he hardly knew Mackenzie. But phone records and physical evidence linked him to her on the night she went missing. When the cops checked out Ajayi's car, they discovered a red gas can and a really strong smell of gasoline. They found out that he bought that gas can on the morning of June 17th, just a few hours after Mackenzie was last seen. All the evidence pointed to a crime that was thought out ahead of time, not just something that happened in a rush. Mackenzie's family and friends were on edge, hoping to get more answers. They were curious if there was any chance she could still be alive, but the police were pretty straightforward that they thought Mackenzie was gone. Finding burnt remains in Ajayi's backyard suggested a really sad conclusion. But the authorities still had to locate Mackenzie's whole body to carry out a proper investigation and help her family find some closure. After Ajayi got arrested, detectives asked him where Mackenzie was. At first, he wasn't really willing to help out. In the end, to dodge a tougher punishment or to act like he was being cooperative, he shared some details about where her remains could be found. On July 3, 2019, police found a shallow grave in Logan Canyon, which is roughly 80 miles north of Salt Lake City. They discovered the burned body of a young woman inside this grave. Dental records and more tests showed that these remains were definitely Mackenzie Lewick's. She had some serious injuries to her head, signs that she had been strangled, and a piece of her scalp was gone. Mackenzie's family felt a mix of heartbreak and a little bit of closure when they found her body. They really wanted to believe she was still alive, but now they were faced with the harsh reality. At least they were able to give their daughter a proper burial and say their last goodbyes. They also discovered more clues near the gravesite. They found out that Ajayi had dug up some of her remains from his backyard when he thought the police were getting close, and then he took them to Logan Canyon to hide them even more. This looked like a really calculated and distant attempt to hide what he did. News outlets shared every little detail about this discovery, and people reacted with a mix of anger and sadness. People in the community were feeling really sad about Mackenzie's death, but they were also scared that someone like that had been living right there with them. Candlelight vigils took place for her, and local leaders talked about how important it is to be aware of personal safety, especially for young women using dating apps. At this point, it was obvious that Ajayi had done something way worse than just killing Mackenzie in a moment of anger. Investigators think he had this murder all planned out. He even turned off his home security cameras and bought gasoline to get rid of any evidence. The shocking details that came out later were really tough for people to handle. Mackenzie had her hands tied up with zip ties and rope, which made it clear that she was being held against her will. Ajayi started by using his hands to choke her. Then, when she was having a hard time, he used a belt to keep choking her. Mackenzie probably begged for her life, but Ajayi just kept going. Mackenzie got hit really hard on the side of her head at one point. She ended up bleeding in her brain, and that played a part in her death. Ajayi might have hit her to silence her, or to satisfy some aggressive urge he had. After he killed Mackenzie, Ajayi attempted to get rid of her remains in his backyard. He collected her stuff and some other things, then set them on fire. Neighbors were really bothered by the awful smell, saying it was something they had never experienced before. Ajayi was really worried that the police would discover what he did, so he decided to dig up the remains of Mackenzie's body and move it to Logan Canyon. He buried her in a shallow grave, maybe thinking that animals or nature would cover up any evidence of what he did. District Attorney Sim Gill mentioned that it looks like Ajayi might have killed Mackenzie just to see what it was like to take someone's life. It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing, it was something planned out and really messed up. This claim really rocked the whole community. People wondered how someone could be so cold and uncaring. When people found out how Mackenzie had died, they were really upset and angry. It was just so hard to believe that a young woman who was nice, smart, and had so much going for her could be taken away in such a terrible way. Mackenzie studied at the University of Utah, which had counseling services for students who were feeling scared or upset by the news. Mackenzie's friends from her sorority, Alpha Chi Omega, shared some really heartfelt messages on social media. They thought of her as a friend who was always there to help with studying, planning events, or just chatting about life issues. They set up candles outside the sorority house and put flowers and notes that said things like, "We miss you, and you will always be in our hearts." Everyone in the city felt it, too. Some local businesses put up pictures of Mackenzie with the words, "In loving memory," on their windows. People who didn't even know her wanted to help out however they could. Whether it was by donating money for funeral expenses, sharing safety advice online, or just sending their thoughts and prayers. A lot of people started to feel more careful again. Parents are telling their kids in college to be extra careful, especially when they're meeting people from dating apps. Women's support groups helped everyone remember to look out for warning signs of dangerous behavior and to share meeting times and places with friends. Basically, everyone in the community joined together to remember Mackenzie and to look out for one another. They really wanted to make sure that nothing like this happened again, at least not without them stepping in to stop it. Even though Ajayi was arrested and charged, people were still curious about how he ended up in this situation. Journalists started looking into his background more closely. So, it turns out he got kicked out of Utah State University for a bit because of some issues with his visa and a claim that he stole an iPad. He got to come back later, but he never ended up finishing his degree. Also, there were other potential victims or people who almost got hurt who talked about Ajayi's aggressive or threatening actions. A woman mentioned that she was scared to go to the police back then because she felt like no one would believe her. Another person mentioned that Ajayi seemed really charming at first, but then he quickly revealed a darker side, pushing boundaries and making her feel uncomfortable. His ex-wife also shared stories about him, threatening to have someone kidnap her if she didn't follow his orders. She said that he could go from being totally chill to super mad in no time at all. All these stories showed someone who had a tendency for violence and used fear and control to overpower others. Then there was Forge Identity, the creepy book that Ajayi wrote. Some people who read it said it had characters that killed others and then burned them. This was just like the method used against Mackenzie. People were curious if Ajayi had been thinking about this crime for a long time before he actually went through with it. They took the book off Amazon after people found out it was linked to the murder case. All these things made a lot of people wonder. Could Ajayi have been stopped earlier? Why didn't they take the earlier complaints more seriously? It's really unfortunate that it usually takes a big tragedy for people to realize how many warning signs can show that someone might be capable of serious violence. Now that Ajayi is in jail, the legal stuff has to happen. He got charged with aggravated murder. This is about intentionally causing Mackenzie's death in a really cruel and planned way. Kidnapping, for restraining her and stopping her from escaping or getting help. Desecration of a body. This is about burning Mackenzie's remains and burying them in 2 separate locations. Later on, prosecutors discovered child pornography on Ajayi's computer, which resulted in more charges for sexually exploiting a minor. He was also charged for a sexual assault that happened in 2018 after a woman spoke up following the news of Mackenzie's murder. This woman mentioned that she saw Ajayi's face on the news and knew she had to say something. At first, Ajayi said he wasn't guilty, and then the case started heading to trial. Prosecutors thought about going for the death penalty because the crime was really brutal. In October 2020, Ajayi decided to plead guilty to first-degree aggravated murder and third-degree desecration of a human body. Because of this, the prosecutors chose not to go after the death penalty. They also agreed to drop some other charges, like aggravated kidnapping and obstruction of justice, in return. Plea deals like this can happen to help the victim's family avoid going through a long and tough trial. It also makes it faster to get the killer found guilty. On October 7, 2020, Ajayi admitted to 2 charges connected to Mackenzie's murder: first-degree aggravated murder and messing with a human body. He confessed that he planned the crime, disabled his security system, tied Mackenzie up, and strangled her with a belt until she stopped breathing. He also confessed to hitting her on the head, which caused serious injuries and made her bleed in her brain. Ajayi mentioned that he burned Mackenzie's body in his backyard and then later dug up her remains to move them to Logan Canyon. District Attorney Sim Gill said that Ajayi might have killed Mackenzie just to experience what it feels like to take someone's life. On October 23, 2020, Judge Venice Treese from the 3rd District sentenced Ajayi to life in prison with no chance of getting out on parole. So, that basically means he's never getting out. Also, he received another sentence of up to 5 years for messing with Mackenzie's body. Ajayi said sorry in court, but a lot of people, including the prosecutors, thought his apology didn't seem real. Mackenzie's parents shared some really heartfelt things in court. Mackenzie's dad said she was such a sweet and amazing girl, and that she had the whole world waiting for her. He mentioned that he would never be able to see her get married or have kids. Her mom didn't say anything in public, but family members mentioned that the pain was just too much to handle. Mackenzie's cousin said she could never forgive the monster who ended her life. For any parent, losing a child to something as terrible as a violent crime is just the worst thing that could happen. Mackenzie's family has had a really tough time finding closure. They noticed the huge impact Mackenzie's death had on her close friends, her sorority sisters, and her community. But really, no sentence can ever bring back someone you care about. Mackenzie's parents said they remember her as a bright spot in their home, always smiling and staying positive. They remember her by chatting about all the fun times they had together, her love for water polo, and her dreams of studying health sciences. They started to get more involved in promoting women's safety and reminding young people to be careful when meeting new people. They checked out nearby colleges, talked at events, and let students know that it's totally fine to say no if something doesn't feel right. It's totally fine to let your family or friends know where you're headed and who you're hanging out with. The entire Lewick family felt that by sharing their story, they could prevent a similar tragedy from happening to someone else. Though nothing can fill the void left by Mackenzie's death, helping others has given them a sense of purpose. A lot of families who have lost someone to crime believe that trying to make positive changes helps them deal with their sadness. It might not take away the hurt, but it can help turn it into something important. Mackenzie's murder got people talking about online safety and the dangers of meeting strangers through apps and websites. A lot of people figured out how simple it is to mask what they really mean when they're online. Ajayi had a history of being violent, but he didn't show that side of himself on any dating profile. Check out these important lessons that experts recommend. Let someone know your plans. If you're hanging out with someone new, make sure to tell a friend or family member where you're going and who you're meeting. If you can, share the person's name or profile. Hang out in public. Instead of heading straight to someone's house or a quiet spot, pick a public place for the first few hangouts. Coffee shops, restaurants, and busy parks are safer places. Trust your instincts. If something seems weird, or if the person is trying to get you to meet at strange times or places, pay attention to that feeling. It's way better to cancel a date than to put your safety on the line. Make sure to check in often. Tell your friend or family member that you got there okay, and set a time to check in again when you're leaving. Look up the person's name or check out their social media to see if you spot any warning signs. It might not be perfect, but it can sometimes show some worrying details. Mackenzie probably thought she was just meeting up with a friend she had been chatting with online for a while. She never thought that someone who seemed like just a regular person could end up being her killer. This situation shows us that it's always smart to be cautious, especially when interacting with people online that we don't know. After Ajayi got arrested for Mackenzie's murder, more women started to come forward about his scary or violent behavior. A woman shared that she connected with him on a dating app back in March 2018, and he asked her to come over. While watching TV, he got really aggressive, kissing her hard and trying to touch her without her wanting it. When she fought back, he held her down and bit her several times. She got away, but the scars from what happened stayed with her. It was only after Mackenzie's case got a lot of attention that this woman felt brave enough to share her story. Ajayi was charged with forcible sexual abuse related to this incident. He was also charged with 19 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor after police discovered child pornography on his computer while investigating. Even though he first said he wasn't guilty of those charges, it became clear that his risky actions were more than just what happened the night he killed Mackenzie. In the end, some charges about pornography were dropped, maybe because of his plea deal or some legal stuff. But the fact that they were there in the first place really showed how deep his criminal behavior went. This guy wasn't just a killer once. He had a history of hurting people and gathering really creepy stuff. Even though there's a lot of talk about Ajayi's crimes, we really need to shift our focus back to Mackenzie. Who she was, what she believed in, and why her life was important. Mackenzie's family and friends say she is. She was really into helping others, often volunteering and being part of a sorority that did a lot of charity work. She's really dedicated. By studying kinesiology and pre-nursing, she's showing that she wants to help others down the line. She was really optimistic, and a lot of people remember how her positive attitude inspired others to do their best. She was a loving daughter and sister who really cared about her parents and her 3 brothers. She would often call just to check on them. She really wanted to work in health sciences, maybe even go to nursing school or medical school later on. She had so much to look forward to. Graduating, starting a career, and maybe even having her own family someday. Her death took away all the chances she and everyone else had. After her murder, her sorority sisters at Alpha Chi Omega organized special memorial services. They created scholarships in her name to support other young women who are studying in similar areas. The aim was to honor Mackenzie by doing nice things and helping others, showing the kind of life she wanted to live. The murder of Mackenzie Lueck is a really sad reminder of how cruel and cold-hearted some people can be. It shows us that bad people can be disguised as nice friends or polite chatters, and that while technology and dating apps are super handy, they can also put us in touch with strangers who might not have good intentions. But her case also teaches us about being aware and preventing things from happening. A lot of people switched up their habits after they heard about Mackenzie. They began sharing their plans with friends, meeting new people only in public spots, and doing more research before heading out. These changes could really help save lives down the road. Mackenzie's family and friends remember her by telling her story, reminding people to look out for warning signs, and advocating for safer online dating practices. They also remind us to keep an eye out for any signs of violent or controlling behavior that keep showing up in someone. Usually, people like Ajayi have done smaller harmful things before they end up doing something really terrible. We need to keep in mind that Mackenzie was a real person, not just someone who went through a tough situation. She had dreams, hopes, and a family that really cared about her. If we remember her and keep her in our hearts, it makes sure that her life meant something. We also want to show respect to her family and friends who went through so much pain. Let's keep Mackenzie's legacy alive, a legacy of caring, hope, and a passion for helping others. Let's remember to stay alert, trust our gut feelings, and do our part to keep ourselves and others safe. If sharing this story can stop even one tragedy, then Mackenzie's memory will shine bright for everyone who learns about her.